Welcome to the Media Roundtable. We're talking to leading voices in podcasts about what they create, why they create it, and the impact that they want it to have on the world. So whether you're a member of the marketing community or the media community, or you're just somebody that's really into podcasts and you care about the impact that the shows that you're consuming have on the world around them, we want you to feel really good about what you consume, what you distribute, and what you support. I'm your host, Dan Granger, and today we have a very special guest that goes by the name of Jason Schulweis. Jason is with Morning Brew, and he is the EVP of Brand Partnerships and Creative Studio at Morning Brew. The company is based in New York City, and their mission is to empower modern business professionals with engaging and accessible content. And you can listen, go to the Morning Brew website. You'll see it says, become smarter in just 5 minutes. As a consumer of this, because this is one of the publications that I follow, I believe that to be true. And you can get daily emails, and they've got a few different iterations of it that make news actually enjoyable. So you can have a little fun while you're getting entertained and informed at the same time for free. So we're going to talk to Jason because this is a very interesting company, and the growth that they have experienced is phenomenal. And I think if you're in the marketing community, if you're a D2C brand, if you're an entrepreneur, or you're a business professional, I think this is going to be really interesting for you. It's not one of the shows where we're talking, national news and politics and approaches like that. But I think from the standpoint of all the different facets of journalism that we're always taking apart here, I think it's very, very interesting because we've never actually spoken with somebody that is a newsletter native. And I think it's a very, very intriguing and underrepresented part of the media ecosystem. So I'm gonna spare everybody going through the credentials and just say, welcome, Jason. We're really grateful to have you here. Big fans of the work that you're doing.
Dan, thank you so much. It's awesome to be here. I'm very excited to talk to you.
Thank you. So for first things first, just to keep our priorities straight, you're a Michigan guy?
I am a Michigan guy.
Did you grow up in Michigan, or did you go to school there and then leave?
Yeah, I went to school there. I'm actually
you just took what you wanted and just left town.
Carpe. Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
I'm born and raised Manhattanite, actually.
Okay.
And I, for whatever reason, I always saw Michigan on the TV when I was younger, and I think that's part of what drew me to be a Michigan fan when I was young. And lo and behold, it was the best school that would have me. So that's
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I spent the first half of my life in Michigan, so I have a lot of pride.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Blue or green?
Blue. My dad's a U of M guy. My sister went to State. So we do have conflicts, but we work through it.
Okay.
We work through it.
Fair
yeah.
enough.
So let's, if you can just, before we get into all the Marketing Brew topics, can you just give us a little context on you? And in addition to where you went to school, your background that led you to what you're doing today?
Absolutely. Well, it does all start at Michigan. I was a double major in psychology and political science. I graduated in 2008, which was not really the best time to graduate. And I didn't know what to do with either of those degrees. I didn't know what to do with either of those degrees.
Why did something happen in 2008 that would impact
it was yes, there was something brewing, or I didn't even mean to.
It's fine. It's fine.
It's just, we do a lot. We have a lot of puns. We're all big fans of puns, and it's just like now ingrained in my head. So yes, something was afoot. And I was able to get an unpaid internship actually at a digital agency called Deep Focus in New York, and that was one of the first true social digital agencies, and I kind of fell in love. I really didn't know what I was doing, and then I started learning about digital marketing and advertising and all these things, and I was just like, this is what I want to do. And so learned a lot, over the course of about a year and a half while I was there. Then went over to the dark side, that is, publisher and media sales.
Mm-hmm.
Spent a bunch of time at Yahoo in a different, bunch of different roles. Then went over to Thrillist Media Group. Started working in integrated marketing at Yahoo. I did a lot of account management. From there, went to Live Nation. Did again integrated marketing. From Live Nation, I went to MediaLink for about 2.5 years, which is a strategic advisory firm. So got to really understand, I think like it was almost to me getting kind of like a PhD in how the marketing industry operates. And it was really from there, as I was doing some research on up and coming cool media companies that hopefully I could, bring into, MediaLink as a client. I started to subscribe to Morning Brew. It was an awesome product. I then get a text out of the blue from a friend of mine who knew Alex Lieberman, and he was puts us on a text and is like, "You guys need to go get together, have a drink. Like something good is going to happen." And this guy, Phil Shermer, is the type of person that's like, if he says that to you, you're like, okay, yeah, done. And actually, the anniversary of that first date with Alex was yesterday.
You got a lot going on this week. This is a very sentimental.
It's a big week. My wife's birthday is actually also on Sunday, so this is this is big time in the Schulweis household.
Yeah.
And I met Alex, and it was kind of like the rest is history moment where he's talking about his vision for Morning Brew, and he was 26 or so at the time. It's like, wow, for a founder to be this young but this poised and this just knowledgeable about his business and the industry and where it's going, and like I'm pretty intrigued. And so we started to like learn a little bit more. He had this role open for head of brand partnerships. Most of the time, I think in media sales, a lot of the times, like the head of brand partnerships, a CRO type role, will often come up through sales. Now I hadn't really done a ton of that, but I had held just about every other role under the sun, in revenue. And my kind of pitch back to Alex was, well, at some point, yes, we're like 15, 20 people now, but at some point, there's going to be a lot of teams that ultimately like need to be talking to each other and working together underneath this, this one revenue umbrella in Morning Brew. And I can speak those languages. I've kind of like seen where we will need to get to. And that was, I guess, intriguing enough for him, where we had a bunch more conversations. I got to meet Austin. He was also equally as impressive, but a very different kind of thinker. And so, after a few weeks, I had met the team. The team was amazing. The founders were amazing. The product was amazing. And everyone really was this unique combination of like smart, kind, and passionate about what they were doing. And it became a no-brainer.
Love it. So let's define it for people that may not be readers yet. Morning Brew, what is its purpose? Why does it exist?
I mean, it exists because there was a challenge, right? There was a problem that Alex and Austin wanted to solve at the University of Michigan, where they also went. And so the Michigan ties also run very deep at Morning Brew.
And yet you're all in New York.
And yet we were all in New York, and none of us are actually from Michigan.
Fair enough.
But it was an insight that Alex had actually when he was a senior. He had, he didn't have a lot of like coursework left. And he was really like studying for a lot of the business interviews and that he was going to have after school. And he was helping his friends study. And he asked everyone the same question, like, what do you do? What do you read to prepare for these interviews, to prepare for the business world? And the answers were, well, I try to read like the New York Times and Wall Street Journal cover to cover, and I try to do all of these things. And I don't think anyone actually does that. And I think even fewer people probably like enjoy trying to do that. And so there was this opportunity to say like, okay, well, what if we could take all of that information, condense it, and make it very enjoyable to read? Like we can throw in some wit, we can throw in some like conversational, like banter and current, kind of like current topics and things like that, make it more relatable. And that's really like the essence of Morning Brew was born. And so, the purpose has remained the same, where there's such an opportunity to, like inform and educate and empower the business leaders of today and tomorrow with this kind of business news and information that can help them across their work, life, career, money, you name it. And so
it's interesting because personally, I get most of my news and information through newsletters. And my problem is that I will start subscribing to way too many. So I probably have like 75 right now, and that's after a reduction. But you just can't, there's no way to do it all. And I would always feel like I'm like an ENTJ, so I need all my boxes checked. So it's really, really hard to not read everything that is sent to me to completion. But I think that the world is living with this to some extent with the proliferation of digital media and everybody having a microphone everywhere. And there's more interesting things to read and hear and watch than we have time in the day, by a long shot. So it sounds like a lot of this was about, just the need for curation, so that if people have one like staple food in their diet, this is like the one thing that you can count on getting the basics synthesized in a way that is not going to, be too much drudgery to, go through it. And it sounds like you answered that question in a really interesting way as an organization.
Yeah, and it's, the curation thing is also really interesting that you bring that up, because that is 100% the way that, Morning Brew started. But as we've grown, as we start to cover more things across not only like business and finance, which is where the flagship newsletter exists, but as we've expanded in marketing brew and retail brew and all these B2B and industry focused publications, we've been hiring a lot of reporters and journalists. And so it is a curated set of news, but there is also a lot of original content and reporting that goes in there as well.
So I think that's an interesting nuance. Does that mean that some of the topics are unique to Morning Brew and your various publications, or is it generally the most relevant topics of the day, and then you take a unique angle on it or go deeper in a certain way because you have the ability to actually create and not just curate? And when I say curate, I think where maybe the distinction is I'm talking about a curation of topics and top line information, but that doesn't mean that you're just a curator.
Totally. And I think it's an important distinction, because I think there are a lot of even current newsletter, companies and publishers and that do operate from a purely like, we're going to try to find a bunch of things and, and put it together. Whereas, I think the way that we're talking about it is with respect to the consumer is just making sure that they are, getting the kind of like the best of the best topically, no matter where that comes from. Some of it could be original. But to your question, it is a little bit of both. We always try to put our own spin on everything. And so, our writers are creating original content, even if it's off of content that exists. And we more so on the B2B side, but our reporters, are looking to, really find scoops, and talk to sources and, not just have a unique POV, but be able to source something that is, true to Morning Brew, where we can roll it out first.
I want to go rapid fire with you to help people understand some of the specs of the business and the industry. What can you tell us about the newsletter industry? Because we get reports on podcast is going to break $1 billion, and what's streaming doing, and we're always watching industries. I never see any data on newsletters. So how big is the industry, and who are the players, and how does it work?
I mean, the industry is absolutely massive. I think from like a TAM perspective, it's I feel like everybody
with an email address.
Exactly. It's everyone with an email address. And that's just like a lot of the way that content has shifted to being delivered directly to people. We kind of went through these like eras of the internet where it was, people went to the .com, then people went to social because that's how it was distributed. But then over the last, however many years, it's really been delivered to your inbox and delivered to your ears, even through, the proliferation of podcasting. And I mean, the big players, obviously I think, Morning Brew is a big player, but you also look at like platforms and technologies that have empowered creators as individuals. I think Substack is obviously one that always comes up. There is a former engineer and product guy that worked at Morning Brew that started Beehive, Tyler Dank. That has a ton of creators on the platform. And so the way that, kind of like people are able to kind of like, do this type of stuff on their own, I think is fascinating. But what has happened, and this is like, I could nerd out about this for a long time. What has happened now is that a lot of these creators went off on their own, and then they kind of maybe didn't realize the other aspects that would go into them as a business. And so, yes, they can write, but who's helping them grow their audience? Who's helping them monetize that audience? Like, who's helping them with product and dev work? Like, there are so many other
Substack,
things.
of course.
Right. Totally. Yes. It is a very incredibly user-friendly.
Yeah.
But there's, I think it's very interesting. And that's where you're starting to see, I think, it shift back, where even what we're doing, we're now working with a lot of creators to bring them onto our platform. Like Katie Gaddy, Money with Katie, I think is a really good example of how we've been able to do this, where she was creating amazing personal finance content. She had an incredibly engaged community. She now works at Morning Brew. She's still creating what she's creating. We've given her more tools to create more, but she now has access to my team, our growth team, our engineering team, to like ramp all of that stuff up in a way that really supports what she's doing.
And so let me just go rapid fire with you on some of this.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of meaty topics that I want to get into with you.
Yeah.
So when you started in 2019 with Morning Brew, you were at how many subscribers and how many at now?
We were, I don't know, I want to say like 700,000 or so.
Okay.
When I started. And now we just celebrated, we just crossed our 4 million subscriber mark. That's just on the flagship one. So, so that doesn't take into account all of the other newsletters that we have, our podcast listeners, et cetera.
Well, so what is your circulation, if you call it that? What's your subscriber if you go all in?
Across the newsletters,
across
and
everything,
social and everything.
Yeah.
Like,
we're talking, social's a little bit of a different thing.
Social's a little bit of a different thing, but when it comes to like, our video views, when
Marketing Brew, or yeah.
Well, just the newsletters, or
let's go newsletters.
Just the newsletters. I can tell you in a second. We've got just about 6 million.
6 million. That's pretty good. Okay, so your flagship is doing 4, the others are doing an incremental 2 altogether. And and then as far as the revenue, I saw somewhere you went from 20 to 50 million, but I bet those numbers have moved since whatever interview I was listening to.
Those numbers have been moving quite a bit.
Okay.
So in 2018, we did 3 million.
Yep.
In 2019, 13.
Mm-hmm.
In 2020, we did 21. Last year, I think, as you heard Austin, we did just about 50. Wow. And this year, we shall see. But I think we're going to try to do north of 80.
Yeah. So you've really been scaling this thing nicely. And so, what do you chalk the growth up to if you had to distill it down to a few things?
The growth across the revenue growth?
Yeah.
I think it's a few things. I would say one is the audience growth that we've experienced. Obviously, like, that can scale if you look at it either from a flat fee basis or a CPM basis. We've been able to increase the cost of the newsletter advertisements because it's going out to more people. And we're very aggressive when it comes to churn and making sure that
increase on a per impression, like a CPM basis, or increase in just in terms of total cost.
Total cost. Yeah.
Okay.
Total cost. But we look at things like, we're used to look at things literally pre iOS 15. We used to look at things on both like a cost per open basis and a like CPM, just total sends.
Yeah.
Now that, cost per open has been a little trickier just in the way that iOS works. So, we do track both of those types of things. And we're also, of course, looking at, ad performance and clicks and all of it, just to make sure that the ads are still performing. So that has allowed us to continue to scale or continue to grow. I think when you look at the scale components, it's been as we've added a lot of B2B new publications where that can be a very lucrative business. because you can charge more because you're talking to a very specific subset of a population, and they are business decision makers. Like oftentimes the companies that are, of course, advertising to, to those folks, like there are very large licenses that they're trying to sell. And so if you know that you're talking to a retail professional, a senior retail professional, or a senior marketing professional, there's a lot that you can charge for that. And then even within B2B, there's a lot of opportunity to go deeper.
Yeah.
And so, for us, part of the reason why, we feel really good about where we're even going this year is because we've been launching more virtual events, which we've been doing, but also roundtables and forums and summits, because there is really like an infinite number of ways where you can continue to go deeper and provide more value to professionals in their fields so they can get better at what they do.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm starting to see like Axios is now sending me solicitations to like help me grow my business and deal with HR. And I'm like, Axios? But it's really interesting how you can have a company start to kind of fan out in terms of the capabilities that go much further beyond just having a megaphone and making one-way statements, to where it's becoming like a service business with all kinds of components that you would have never considered. And it sounds like you guys are fanning out in the same way. How much of the business that you're doing right now is podcast?
It's a growing, I would say it's a growing segment. It's one of our smaller ones right now. And I think we've largely found some of our voice, but we're still trying to find more of it.
Yeah.
And so we have 3 podcasts right now. Founders Journal, which is Alex Lieberman's kind of like, diary of a founder to the world. We've got Business Casual, which is co-hosted by Nora Ali and Scott Rogowski. And then Imposters is our latest one, which is also hosted by Alex, which is one that we're really excited about because it really explores the intersection between, entrepreneurship and mental health. And it really speaks to the, I think just to the authenticity that Alex really brings, to the table. And there's a lot of really raw conversations. And then I lied, there's actually the one that we just launched when we brought Katie Gaddy over. Money with Katie is also in podcast form as well.
Super cool.
Yeah.
And I really like that concept with Imposters because of all the things I'm watching on TV right now. It's founders gone mad, left and right. And the reality is, it's I think we're all crazy. I think we all start that way to some extent, but like the larger your resources, the bigger your reach, the more damage that does if you don't learn how to manage it. And so I think that's a very, very valuable asset. Of all the things that you're doing that are more purpose oriented, is that pretty high on the list, or do you feel like there are other things that you're doing that have a specific kind of social good aspect to it?
That is probably, I think, one of the things that ties most closely to, I think, social good.
Okay.
Now, I think if you broaden the purpose part of your question, a lot of what we are also doing is making sure people are more, educated about their money. And, we believe in the importance of financial literacy, and things like that. And so that also does guide a lot of the content. And what we do is to really try to help people, make better, smarter decisions about what they're doing in their work and life and everywhere in between. That's why we have a lot of career focused content. That's why we have a lot of money focused content.
What do you think about media literacy?
Media literacy?
Yeah.
In what respect?
Well, so a lot of the work we're doing through this show and through partnerships with groups like Adfontes Media, and we just co-launched an initiative with a tech firm called Barometer that actually they evaluate media based on kind of the most objective third-party criteria we can, so that consumers can know and advertisers can have a better understanding of what's inside. We're very focused on trying to, like, our movement is to try to bring like nutrition labels to media so that people can kind of separate the wheat from the chaff and make more informed decisions. But sometimes the places you're getting your information from, nobody's giving you information on them. And
Yeah.
so that's very important to us. I think that's a really critical gap we have in culture. And I think that journalism, media is all playing a very important role in what's become a big problem. But I think we have to be our own solution to an extent. So I don't know if you guys if that's on your radar at all.
It is. We talk about that a lot. We think about that a lot. I think one of the things that we saw, especially like early in the pandemic, was the need to be a like trusted source of information for people, where there was so much negativity, there was so much misinformation, there was like so much of so much.
Yeah.
And so, we wanted to be that kind of like trusted, regular source of news and information for people. And I think a lot of that kind of clicked in that moment, that how important that is, to be for people, and to have Morning Brew be a name that consumers recognize as like, not influenced by something, where it's all very objective what we're trying to do, and we don't skew politically one way or anything like that. And I think that is an intense responsibility.
It's hard to do.
It's very hard
It's hard to do
and
as a publisher. And it's what I appreciate about Morning Brew is that it's one of the publications where I can't tell where you're coming from, which is how maybe, the old ideas of journalism, that's kind of how it's supposed to be a little bit. And it's, but the problem is, like, there's so much low hanging fruit in the explosive and the exploitative and stoking fear and outrage, right? There's a lot of money in that. And so to see somebody that's using a different model and growing a business as substantially as you have here is heartening. And I think it actually is a good bellwether for the marketplace in the country, that there is appetite for that.
Yeah, there is. And it's also a conversation that we have with our partners, where if we know that there's something like big and important and maybe even controversial that is in the news, even the way that we talk about that is always in a way that we know that people need to understand what's going on. And they also understand that, I mean, I'm sure you talk about this a lot, is like, even support of journalism, like,
Yeah.
a lot of that does need to be ad supported.
Yeah.
And so, I think there's a really interesting relationship and dance that exists between the publication, the audience, and the advertisers that support that ecosystem. When it comes to, the things that are happening in the news, that, advertisers historically, I think, have been cautious to be around, but, we embrace that type of conversation with our partners, because people need to read the news and what's going on. And they also need products, like they need other things that come along with that ad supported model. And so that can all exist. But it's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. And so are there certain policies or practices that have gotten you guys there or been able to do that? And I'm just going to provide some like use cases. You had the CEO of Coinbase, I believe it was, that basically said, you're not allowed to talk politics at the office, like while you're on work hours, which I get why he did that. I'm not sure that, we all want to be regulating speech, but then you have so many media entities, like Daily Wire just goes out and launches a razor brand. They're trying to take a shot at Disney by creating children's content, right? And you're starting to see polarization actually result in totally different media ecosystems, but now totally different economies. If we're actually buying products and services, CPG products, based on political ideology, crazy. So how do you not get sucked into that when it's always the lever that will drive engagement?
I guess for us, it's making sure that everything we do remains true to that North Star that we talked about earlier when it comes to that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And even when we do look to create our own products or services, they are all in service really of our mission statement. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you look at the ways that we've started to monetize outside of advertising, the first two things that we've done is commerce. And that is capitalizing on just people's love of Morning Brew. And so like a lot of what we sell in the Morning Brew store is the stuff that people were loving, to why they shared Morning Brew so much and why our referral program was so great is like people love Morning Brew swag.
Hey, I want to pivot for a second.
Yeah.
You have, I've heard, not you, but folks on your team talking about the hub and spoke model for content creation. And I think one of the things that brands and corporations, I think one of the things we all struggle with is figuring out, like, how do you keep up with the appetite and the volume of platforms and opportunities to publish, and can you get further and derive the benefits of seeking engagement across your team? So in other words, so for example, on this show, we're an ad agency. We're not a podcast company that creates podcasts. We have a newsletter. It reaches thousands of people. We're not a newsletter company, right? And so we kind of have our own version of citizen journalists that are subbing in, doing the work to manage social media, to manage or to create content to push out on social media, to have content that we can push out in our newsletters and so forth. So your company has an approach that engages people that are not just full-time journalists, as I understand it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, when I've talked to Alex and Austin about the kind of like the hub and spoke model, it's a few different things. It's both from a personnel perspective, but I think also really where you start to see it in effect is in the content itself. And so if you look at even Alex or Katie, when we brought her over, she is creating. They are both creating content across a number of different themes and mediums very regularly. They do have a lot to offer, when it comes to areas of expertise, but also, different formats where they may find, better performance and better resonance than on others. And when it comes to, I think, the media industry today, it is so valuable that you can find those types of creators and talent who are able to produce and think well outside of one specific niche. And you marry that with being able to, like, if you take this podcast, which is also being recorded visually, and so you have an audio and a video asset. If you have an audio and a video asset and the ability to transcribe some of this, you now have content that can live across three mediums. Within those three mediums, there's also, a million different platforms that you can take the video assets and cut it down even more, distribute it on social. Like, what you can do with one piece of content is effectively infinite these days. And so when you kind of compound the right talent with the right content, you get scale. Like, you get scale of content that can live everywhere, wherever our community is.
So it isn't necessarily about having somebody who works in accounting now being part of the content creation mechanism. It's more about having people that might have a specialization, but letting them broaden the scope of what content they're covering. Is that more what you're saying?
That is what I'm saying.
Okay.
I would say, though, we have an open casting call. If we have someone in accounting who wants to try their hand in content creation and talk about, accounting tips, tricks, and things, like, as an expert, I mean, there's no reason why we wouldn't help them make that so.
Yeah.
And I think you see a lot of creators now who were operators and can learn how to create content, but their perspective and their expertise, like, that's very hard to find because they've really done it.
Yeah. So, Marketing Brew as a business, you guys have opted out of the Substack route. You're not charging a subscription. What was the thinking that got you there?
I mean, the advertising business that we've been doing for a long time across Morning Brew and Retail Brew and Emerging Tech Brew were the first two kind of B2Bs was working. For us being able to have a free newsletter and have that be supported by really good ads is a strong business model. It's hard because even the way
you must get tempted though. You must get tempted to like carve out and go, well, we're going to take our premium, our best stuff, and we're going to just start charging a monthly subscription for that. Do you see yourself never going there? Is that philosophically something you're opposed to, or you're smirking? In case you're listening and not watching, Jason has a huge grin right now. So we've tapped into something.
No, it's look, you never say never.
Yeah.
But what we've been doing has been working really, really well. Yeah. And the way that we, again, really look at advertising in our newsletter products is a form of native content, because we don't accept third-party tags and things like that. So we've been able to take something that shouldn't scale and have it scale with us, where we are, we partner with our clients and really understand their messaging points and what they want to do, and everything gets funneled through our creative team to kind of brewify it and have it live very natively and organically in the newsletters, or even in podcasts themselves. Everything we do is host read, and
which I love, by the way. I'm a voice in a movement to save the live read in podcasts, because we're all moving to dynamic insertion. Everybody's looking for scale. And what I think most people don't appreciate is when you go for just scale and efficiency, you can end up kind of selling the soul of what you're offering in the process and lose the magic that made it worth being a part of to begin with. And so I really, really respect that. And I've heard you talk about how you're even on your site, you're not doing dynamic ads. You're doing organic ads that are thoughtfully written and customized. So you mentioned on your podcast, you're doing live reads, but I think for marketers who are a lot of D2C brands, it's good for them to know that the thing that is magical about podcasts, that you can get that host affiliation and get them to recommend you in their own voice. That is more of the model that you've brought to the newsletter business. And you've injected it with humanity, and humanity is ultimately more trustworthy. So it's more persuasive. So it's more effective. And if you can keep your integrity intact while you're doing it, you've really got a winner. How much of your businesses do you work with brands direct versus agencies?
It, a couple of years ago, it used to be like 90% brand direct. We've been trying to get something closer to 50-50. We still are a little bit more brand direct, and I think that's probably a result of channel-based buying, and different types of expertise, and where we've had those relationships from like either newsletter only buys and things like that. But as we've expanded into podcasts, as we've expanded into branded content and events, we're now having
third parties. Yeah. Well, look, I think that's great if you can, hold those numbers. That's fantastic. And then how much of what you're doing is performance advertising versus brand advertising?
I would say it probably skews also more performance. It again used to be almost exclusively performance. But as we've grown, as we've had larger conversations with both brands and agencies, and as really the Morning Brew brand and IP itself has grown, there is a lot of value that our partners do see in the alignment. And whereas, yes, when it comes to clicks and conversions, that is the easiest way to potentially measure success, which of course we do look at. But we have started to implement a lot of brand lift studies to actually measure the upper funnel effects and prove out performance now, not just at the bottom of the funnel, but at all points of the funnel.
Yes. And that means that you don't have to be on the phone with people like us all the time going, my cost per acquisition is too high this week. Change something.
I love those
Oh,
conversations.
of course you do. Of course, everybody does. So let's talk branded content for a second, because I know that's a focus. I'm a skeptic. Is branded content bullshit? Because a lot of what I see that flies under the banner of branded content from other networks and different types of media is bullshit. So what's your position on that? And I can tell you why, if helpful. Okay, sure. So the reason I say that a lot of what I see is bullshit is because it's so cheap to create certain types of media. And I think that, look, everybody wants, if you're on the marketing side, you don't want to just do ads. You want to be in content. You want to be cool, and you want downstream. You want to be able to fund a movie that wins awards at Sundance, and then somehow everybody ends up buying your widget directly and uses the promo code at the same time. Everybody wants to have it both ways. And like in podcast, every network will offer you branded shows. But, by the time you've done episode 14 of the Kroger podcast, like how interested are you in that content? How unique a tribe can you really build when there are a million of these things? And you now have the dual objective of driving sales and driving entertainment at the same time. And ultimately sales is going to win. And so ultimately you're going to have shitty content. Ultimately, it doesn't work. Meanwhile, the people that are selling it are building in ridiculous margins because production can be such a black box that it becomes a cash cow for the seller, and the hopeful buyer who believes that they can have it both ways doesn't get either one. That's why I think a lot of it's bullshit.
I mean, bad branded content is bullshit. Okay. But there's a flip side to that. Like, it can be good. And, I think a few things. When you are just churning out branded content just because it's a product, I don't think it's necessarily going to be good. Okay. But I'll use even just Morning Brew as an example.
Yeah. I want to know, what is branded content at Morning Brew?
Branded content is everything. In the newsletter, the biggest ad unit that we have is 150 words of native content. That is branded content that exists inside of an editorial product. That is something that we create in partnership with a brand that is in our tone and voice, but conveys the right messaging points that they ask us to do. Longer form branded content, something that exists on a web page or whatever, is a longer form of that. And so for us, that was always true to our DNA in terms of how we worked with brands. And we've gone so far as, what we've done with Fidelity, where we've actually won a few awards, is we did create a custom branded podcast called Fresh Invest. And that is something that is very successful. Now, that is a partnership where we're rotating themes and experts and really relating it to what is current. And so it's not necessarily the same thing over and over again, but we've been building up a lot of trust with them. We filmed one of the episodes in the metaverse. We're doing fun and interesting things with them because of the trust that we've built up, and it is good content.
So it's interesting, and just to parse this for a second. So on one hand, I understand what you're saying and fully accept and align that when you're doing sort of endorsed or in the voice of the medium, that is, you are pushing your ad message through that so it is more palatable and enjoyable for the audience. I am totally on board with that, totally aligned, totally get it. When you talk about a podcast that you do for somebody, or if you were to do a newsletter, that's the it's the Wells Fargo Brew newsletter, where they pay you to tap into your audience, and they're actually going to tell you either A, stuff that their customers would be interested in, or B, things that will make you sign up today as a new customer. There has to be there has to be the right formula, and it's very hard to get those ingredients right. And what I have found out for the performance marketers is it's very hard to let it qualify as like standalone quality content that also drives sales. So do you have to pick a side on that as a marketer before you buy it? Do you have to decide if you're looking for a ROAS or a CPA goal versus an awareness affinity goal? And does it work? Can you do good content that sells enough product to pass both tests?
I think it's possible, but it's hard.
Yeah.
I think as a marketer, you do have to be very specific. And if you do want to just drive sales, and if you're just looking at conversions, like, maybe you take a second look at branded content, or you look to see, okay, if we're trying to do this and maybe another business unit at our company, is trying to do something else, there might be a way to look at branded content as something more than just a conversion driving tool. I think for the way that we look at it is, ideally it is something that is either upper funnel or full funnel, where, we are able to tell a story. And that's why, in addition to looking at clicks and conversions, we are trying to, tie our brand lift studies and surveys to this piece of content so that we can paint actually a full picture of what the brand is, and be able to introduce people to the brand and the product, and then hopefully sell something through. And if the content is great, there will also be a little bit of a selection process as to who reads it. And so the ad itself will likely be even more effective because the content will draw in the right people.
Yeah. So I think where maybe we can align on this is that risk goes up when you're trying to, when the balance shifts more towards entertainment. Expectations have to be carefully managed. If you're a new brand and every dollar needs to give you a payback, this is not the place to start. However, there is a holy grail. It is probably achievable, but it may be better suited to brands that have the runway, the resources, the ability to value those upper funnel metrics more so than the person that is a pure savage performance marketer. And even though we all want to do branded content, it may not be right for everybody. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay, cool. And I know you're pressed for time, so just final word to you. How can marketers that are interested in living out their values, but also driving sales, what advice would you have for them, and what can you offer to them to get into partnership with Morning Brew and its various assets?
Yeah, I mean, it's have a conversation with us, and you can hear what we're about, and we can often create something that is very true to both of our values. And again, I think that all ties back to the way that we operate, where everything does get translated into the Morning Brew tone and voice. But if we try to translate something, inauthentic into our, tone and voice, it's not necessarily going to work. And so, I think it's just being open to having that initial conversation and being very honest with each other. And if there is a fit, then making sure that, there is good kind of trust on both sides, that, we can take care of, the brand and the message, and, make sure that the Morning Brew community and audience sees it the way that we do too.
Yeah. Jason, thanks for going along with us here. I appreciate as a consumer, but also as a marketer, the work that you and your organization are doing. You create a first-class product. You're dealing with your partners in a first-class way. And I think that the world is better because there are people approaching media and approaching journalism in the way that you are, and the world needs more of it. And you're also a good dad, which is why you need to get off the phone right now. So great to meet you. Lots of good things ahead. And thanks for spending the time with us today.
Dan, thank you so much. And what you just said, it means a lot to me. So I do appreciate it all around. And this was great. And I look forward to chatting more in the future.
To be continued. This show is dedicated to our mission of mobilizing marketers to advance truth and civility in journalism. We value clarity, truth, fairness, respect, de-escalation, and tolerance. You can learn all about these things at mediaroundtable.com, and talk to us. Tell us what you want with this show. We're going to be taking a break soon, not quite yet. But in a few weeks, we're going to go and take a little summer break. But send us a note. Let us know what you're thinking about, how we're doing, and what you want to hear more of. If you're a marketer and you're looking to balance your business objectives with your brand values, also reach out to our agency. It's called Oxford Road. You go to oxfordroad.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter along with Morning Brew. It's called The Influencer. Special thanks to Bianca, Kyle, Jennifer, Amy, and the team at Podcast One. And as always, please influence responsibly.